Well, have mercy on me. Welcome back to the countdown. Got a story and a half to talk about this record at number 32. Well, dadgum, I stiffed it out at 32 on this fancy playlist. A fine rock and roll record, pretty commercial too. 38 Special, Back to Paradise, a Lost 45 on this fancy playlist. And I love those Lost 45s. His fancy playlist of August 29, 1987, and got the backstory of this song. It was from an article that I picked up from the guy who wrote the song himself, one of the big co-writers of this record, Jim Valence. But the song Back to Paradise. Now, one thing you got to know, I'm going to be upfront with you about this record. Only one member of 38 Special performed on this song, played on this song. It was basically Jim Valence and Don Burns. Now, I'm confused. I'll be honest with you. I'm confused about one thing. I've been trying to pin down who the lead singer of 38 Special was. Some sources has it as Donnie Van Sant, and the others, and there's some sources. One source said that Don Barnes sang lead on most of their hit records in the early to mid-'80s. But I tell you this, whoever sang lead on 38 Special, and feel free to correct me one way or the other, underrated singing, very passionate singing. Well, here's the deal. The band started. The band goes back. They were performing for years before they had their first hit record. 38 Special, they formed in the mid-'70s in Jacksonville, Florida. Don Barnes and Donnie Van Sant, among the founding members of 38 Special, and heavily influenced by the Allman Brothers, and did the Southern rock thing for a number of years. But by the early 80s, they moved into more of a commercial direction. I guess what I would call now more of a classic rock direction. Powerful, super passionate vocals by the lead singer of 38 Special. I have to say this. I'm thinking about all the singers who've been underrated over the years. Gene Pitney comes to mind from back in the early to mid-'60s. And another one that comes to mind, obviously, the lead singer of 38 Special. 38 Special, the first song I remember hearing by 38 Special, it came out in 1980, I believe. It was called Rockin' in the Night, which was written by the group member Survivor. Survivor was going to put that on their first album, but somehow the manager got a hold of, somebody got a hold of the Survivor song and gave it to 38 Special, and they did Rockin' in the Night. Went to number 43 on Billboard's Hot 100. And I believe I first heard on Kicks 106 in 1980. Kicks 106 in Birmingham back in 1980. But boy, they hit their stride. Hold on loosely. In 1981, Fantasy Girl came right after on the heels of that. Went to number 35 or 34, 36 on Billboard. Summer, fall of 1981. Boy, this guy just poured his guts out. His heart and soul. The lead singer on this record. And then there was Caught Up in You in 1982, which was a monster record for 38 Special. But there were others too. Teacher, Teacher. Anybody remember Teacher, Teacher from 1984? And another one they did, Back Where You Belong. And If I'd Be the One, that was one of the most emotional deliveries ever as far as the lead singing was concerned. And that was in 1983 and 84. But now we're in 1987. Now, Back to Paradise was going to be, it was in a movie, part of the soundtrack, I believe, Revenge of the Nerds 2. Best of 38 Special. It was going to be an album called Best of 38 Special. Now, here's how this song came about. It all started with Jim Valence. Bryan Adams' songwriting sidekick. Jim Valence. I keep running into that name. Look, here's the deal. If you read about maybe groups like Prism and a Canadian band and Bryan Adams, you're going to run into Jim Valence's name. Very talented songwriter. Jim Valence, he went to Los Angeles. He teamed up with Pat Benatar to work on Pat Benatar's new album. But Pat Benatar, she was preoccupied. She had a baby and needed to spend time with the baby. So he hung out at Pat Benatar's home studio with her husband. And his name, he was a guitar player too, Neil Giraldo. But little got done with Neil Giraldo because Neil Giraldo, he was preoccupied too. He had bought some vintage audio equipment and he was just too engrossed with the equipment to really do any songwriting. But fortunately, Pat Benatar, she took a break from the baby, and she teamed up. She got together with Jim Valence, and they wrote basically what would become Back to Paradise, a rough draft. They got down some of the lyrics, the chords, the melody, but they didn't have the song title. Jim Valence, he flew back to Vancouver. He teamed up with Bryan Adams, and they finished the song, Back to Paradise. Now, here's what happened after that. Jim Valence and Don Barnes of 38 Special, along with the engineer, a sound engineer, well, an audio engineer named Brian Foraker. It's Foraker. Maybe it's Foraker or Foraker. I'll just pronounce it Foraker. He worked with Jefferson Starship, an engineer. All three of those guys, they went to the recording studio, and that recording studio, I'm trying to remember the name of the recording studio. It's in Vancouver. Little Mountain Sound. They went to Little Mountain Sound recording studio in Vancouver, and that's it. None of the group members of 38 Special were on this record except for Don Barnes. Don Barnes, he sang lead. He played all the guitars on this record. Jim Valence, he programmed. Jim Valence, he programmed the bass. He programmed the drums, the keyboards that went into this record. They used 2 background singers, also based in Vancouver, Canada, and session singers. They used Mark LaFrance, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, and Paul Jantz backing vocals, all from Vancouver. So this is the caper right here. None of the group members except for Don Barnes actually was on this record by 38 Special. But my goodness, Jim Valence and Don Barnes and these 2 backup singers, and of course the recording engineer, they did a superb job making this song sound like a classic 38 Special record. And to some extent it showed. It went to number 4. Number 4 on Billboard's album rock charts. It was on the album rock charts on Billboard for 11 weeks. So that was equivalent to about almost 4 months. But the song itself did not fare too well. Only got as high as number 41 on Billboard's Hot 100. 38 Special, so probably being shunned aside by the rise of particularly hair metal. You got Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, and I got a Def Leppard song coming up later on in this countdown too. Their first single off the Hysteria album. I believe it was called Hysteria. I better double check on that. But I lost my train of thought. Well, here's the deal. Understandably, you're talking about 38 Special, a self-contained band. They've been together. I'm sure they've had their ups and downs, and boy, they had all these hit records in the early to mid 80s. Obviously, word got back to Jim Valence that the other band members were not too pleased that they were left out, and that's quite understandable. If I was a member of 38 Special and I was left out from recording the record, I'd probably be upset too. But according to Valence, Don Barnes explained that he had a strained relationship with one of the band members, guitarist Jeff Carlisi, and they were bandmates. They were friends for years, but their relationship, their friendship became strained between these 2 guys, and there must have been some influx of negativity going on within the band because Don Barnes, he left 38 Special to pursue a solo career in 1987, but then he got back together with the band and patched things up, and they reformed back in 1991. So things, I guess, sort of worked out in the long run with 38 Special. Ooh, boy, Back to Paradise. I believe I just want to make sure I covered everything on this record about how this record was created and everything, because I so badly wanted to get this out to you. I came across all this information just, it was yesterday, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it, on an obscure record too. All right, well, here we are. We're rocking out 38 Special at number 32 on this fancy playlist, Back to Paradise, strolling down memory lane with Dean Kirk. Take care.